Does Christian liberty always have to take a path away from current beliefs, or should it strengthen them? Are you ready to face the truth? Face the Truth is the weekly podcast from the Truth Church of Olathe, Kansas, with our pastor and Bible teacher, Bishop Gregory Riggin. Thank you to everyone who is listening. I trust that today's episode will be a blessing to all those that tune in. What we need to understand about Christian liberty is that there is a principle in the Bible that deals with a question or issue, not necessarily a specific forbidding. You just have to look for it. And that one principle may cover several different things. Paul said in 1 Corinthians 10:23, "All things are lawful for me, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful for me, but all things edify not." God has given us free will, and we have the choice as to whether or not we participate in, watch, or listen to things that are not directly called sin in the Bible. Christian liberty does not give us the excuse to compromise our convictions and allow things we once stood against. Love God and love people. These are the two commandments upon which hang all the law and the prophets. They give us liberty to live the way we should, not the way we want to. If you live long enough, you will have someone do you wrong. You will be hurt, offended, even wounded by another person. We've all heard the old maxim, you cannot control others' actions. You can only control your reaction. Romans 12:19 tells us vengeance is the Lord's. He will repay. We must let their sin against us go unpunished by us. How can we say we love our brothers and sisters if we intentionally or even unintentionally place a stumbling block in their way? You may not know their history, what God delivered them from. Doing something that would bring back memories of their sin, stirring up those old feelings, is not helping uplift our church family. True liberty helps us care for, love, and help our brothers and sisters, bearing their burdens and so fulfilling the law of Christ. Now, let's join the conversation with Bishop Riggin.
Do we believe in Christian liberty? Do we teach that? And Christian liberty is just the idea that if it's not expressly condemned in the Bible, then a Christian is not required to do it. And in my mind, it smacked kind of, well, not in my mind, it didn't smack anything, but it felt like it was kind of what Brother Walter was saying the other night when he was preaching. He's like, I want to do everything I can to get into heaven. I don't want to just slide into heaven.
If you have to have a specific biblical prohibition, then what's wrong with cocaine?
Right. That's a great point. I think that's a perfect illustration. There's the spirit of the law, and then there's the letter of the law.
To me, to follow this idea that the Bible has to have a specific prohibition, that's exactly what, to some degree, the Pharisees were doing. Now, the Pharisees like to play in both ditches, depending on what the issue was. Because there were some things that, just like Jesus said, you say, or the law says, you don't commit adultery. But he said, I'm saying to you that if you look on a woman with lust in your heart, you've committed adultery with her in your heart already. Well, in that instance, the Pharisees wanted to strictly take the letter of the law and live by it.
Okay.
But then there were other things like do no work on the Sabbath day where they wanted to go in and expand on that and say, okay, working equals walking beyond a certain distance, and working equals doing more than menial cleaning, and working equals, and so they wanted to go in and add to what the law said in some cases, and they wanted to find ways around the law in other cases. So they kind of played in both ditches there, depending on how it best served them. And of course, we as apostolics could do the same thing. And I don't mind us taking the time to discuss this idea. I have not heard it, this expression of Christian liberty. I haven't studied this. And so if that's really what it means, is that you need a specific biblical prohibition. I can see where he's going with it, because what he's trying to do is justify things they've let down on.
It's also the same thing that the denominational or the more popular Christian world uses to justify drinking and alcohol.
Right.
I've heard others reformed.
Well, this may surprise you, but it's not just denominals. I've dealt with oneness apostolics who, because they believe that you ought to use alcohol in communion, when you push them, they will admit that they do not believe it's a sin to consume alcohol. They recommend against it except during communion. But if you really push them, there's no way they can condemn social drinking.
Yeah. Because this is a social environment when you're drinking the wine.
Well, it's not so much that. It's just that the only way we can really condemn social drinking is to say that partaking of wine is a bad thing. And you can't make that kind of a statement and believe that you need to do it at communion.
I see.
And so in order to justify their usage of it in communion, they can't prohibit it altogether. I just wanted to clarify, it's not just the denominational realms that have that idea about alcohol. But we see that, this is one of the big issues with beards. Let's just be honest. That's the thing that has been for the last few years, facial hair on men.
I was reading a verse of scripture. This may have nothing to do with this, but I was reading about brotherly love. But it was in Galatians 5:13. It says, "For brethren, ye have been called unto liberty. Only use not liberty for an occasion to the flesh, but by love serve one another."
Wow.
And when you go in and look at Thayer's for that liberty, I just glanced at it. And it says, liberty to do or omit things having no relationship to salvation was one. Fancied liberty is number 2, which is a license, the liberty to do as one pleases. 3, true liberty is living as we should, not as we please. And that was what it's talking about in the word for liberty. But when you was talking about liberty, I'm like, that sounds really familiar. So I scrolled down like, that liberty really is given to us for loving one another,
Wow.
not for doing as we please.
That's very good. That's applicable. That's directly applicable.
Yeah, and then the very next verse of scripture it says, "For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself."
Wow. Even that statement right there gets underneath the letters of the law. It's
Right.
talking about you're going to obey the law, you're going to fulfill the law, you're going to do this through love.
Right.
And, Jesus said the greatest of all the commandments is love the Lord your God with all your
Right.
heart, with all your mind, with all your strength. And then love your neighbor as yourself. These are the two, which all the other laws are. And so if you do love God, if you do love your neighbor, that I might say is the spirit of the law. I'm not sure if that's...
Jesus said on these two, hang all the law
Right.
and the prophets. So that is the foundation of the entire law, is loving God and loving your neighbor. This idea of liberty, you're exactly right, Brother Goff, that scripturally, Paul makes it clear we're not to use that for an occasion to the flesh.
Yep.
And that word occasion means to accomplish a goal, to take an opportunity. So Paul says this liberty that we have is not a liberty to do what our flesh wants to do,
Right.
but we need to be considerate of others. It does matter whether it offends our brother. And that word offend, today everybody's offended. The whole
Right.
world's offended at something, it seems like. You use a pronoun and they're offended.
Right.
That's not the way the word was intended in the King James Bible. Offend in our Bible comes from a Greek word that means to cause to stumble. It's to put a stumbling block in front of someone. It's not to hurt their feelings. It's to put a stumbling block in front of them. So when the Bible tells us not to offend our brother, it's don't do something that would cause your brother to stumble.
So I was reading in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 8, and it says, "And above all these things have fervent charity among yourselves, for charity shall cover the multitude of sins." And when I read that just at the surface level, I know we own our own actions, right? I say something, do something, I own that action. But I also own my reaction. And if I love someone, I own that response. And if I get offended, just me, how I'm reading this means that I've lost a level of love for them because I've allowed their action to cause me to respond in a way that I see their sin. It's no longer covered by love, but I am now all up in arms and offended over something that really, based on what I'm reading here, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but love, if I have the right spirit, the right attitude towards them, I don't respond in kind. I own my response, and so I need to have love temper all of my responses.
Yes. And again, to that particular verse, 1 Peter 4:8, that charity shall cover a multitude of sins. The word cover, as it's used in this verse, means to not punish. It doesn't mean to ignore. It means that you're not going to punish them, or as you said, to respond in kind.
Right.
You're not going to take it out on them. You love them enough. They sin against you. You don't turn around and punish them for what they've done. If you love them enough, then you learn how to deal with the things that they've done against you, accepting those things. You know, if you read on down through 1 Peter 4, he really gets into the whole idea of suffering as a Christian and what's involved in that. And so with that in mind, because, it's down in verse 12 that he starts saying, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial, which is to try you as though some strange thing happened. He goes there talking about how we as Christians are going to go through things. We are going to be tried. So he leads up to that by saying that this charity is not going to lash out at someone else. If you've got charity, if you've got this agape love, this self-sacrificing love, you don't lash out. You don't seek vengeance. You don't try to give an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But you let their sin go unpunished by you. And in fact, the very next verse, use hospitality one to another without grudging.
Yes.
Even that word hospitality is philoxenos, and you might recognize phileo, a kind of love.
Right.
This is a kindness to strangers, being kind to others. Use hospitality to one another without grudging. And that word is muttering or murmuring. So you don't even go around complaining about what they've done to you. You don't go around telling others, well, boy, they've really hurt me. They've really done these things.
Sure.
They really stabbed me in the back. They really, but I'm going to be a Christian about it. No, if you're going to be a Christian about it, you're going to keep your mouth shut about it. You're not even going to try to imply that they've hurt you. You're going to keep your mouth closed and not murmur about what they've done to you. That's how charity, agape, sacrificial love covers or refuses to bring judgment and punishment on a multitude of sins.
So that goes back to that comment Brother Hilton made about Christian liberty. So we can choose to twist the words and make it benefit us, things I can do, liberties that gratify my flesh. Or I can do what the scripture says in Galatians and use it to love my brother.
Yes.
So then when the scripture says, bear ye one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ, that's loving my brother. So if I could take this step, in terms of restoration of your brother, if I haven't done the love or have the love that you just described, I can't restore anyone because I'm talking about that person. I'm running that person down. But unless that agape love, that love that you just described is present, there is no restoration.
Right.
I think that's what people lose sight of, is like this law that we've been called to fulfill. And it's ones that it was stated by Jesus himself, here on earth, talking about, to love your neighbor as yourself. That's this right here. That's
Yes.
bearing your brother's burdens. Here's my thought around that. If I'm going to bear my brother's burdens, that means I'm right there next to them. It's a smooth transition. It's not that I have to bend over and let them fall and fail and lay on the ground. It's that I am there to help them carry that load, and I see their stumble and I see them get weak, and I am there to bear their burden. I put that burden on alongside them. I don't trot upon them. I don't beat them down with words. I lift them up in prayer. But when I bear their burden, that means I picked it up. I've took it off their shoulders. I'm there with them. And I know that because I'm there with them in love. If it's through the liberties you talked about, Brother Hilton, earlier, then I see something from afar. I'm not there intimately with them, not in the moment with them in their life. And I think that's what stood out to me in there's several passages of scriptures that we talked about.
This idea of Christian liberty. Again, my contention is they want to embrace this idea because they know they have backed away from standards they have held for years. And so their excuse is, well, those things are not specified in Scripture. Well, there are a lot of things that are not specified in Scripture.
True.
But there are scriptural principles that address those things. And we have to learn the spirit of the law. We've got to learn the biblical principles, not just the black and white, thou shalt not.
Right.
If we limit our convictions to only the things that are specified in Scripture, that's a really short list.
Right.
But what is specified in Scripture, on the other hand, is exactly what we're talking about. If you really love your brother, you're not going to use liberty to satisfy your flesh when you know that doing so might cause another brother to stumble. They see you doing this, and you may claim, well, I can do it and handle it.
Right.
But they can't handle it. And your demand that I have no problem with this, I can control this, totally ignores the brother or sister who cannot. Yep. One of the examples that I use, and I'm not at all saying that this is sin, all right, but I'm just saying it was something that in this setting, I had to keep in mind. In my first pastorate, there was a man that preached for men I knew and respected. I'd heard him preach, was very impressed, seemed to be a very conservative man, and I invited him to come preach for me. Well, this man loved bluegrass, and I think he played the guitar. So he would do this bluegrass gospel. Well, bluegrass gospel has never been my favorite, okay? People hear me talk about Southern gospel, and they think that's what I'm talking about. But
Right.
There is a difference between Southern gospel and bluegrass.
Right.
There's even a difference between Southern gospel and country gospel.
True.
A lot of people, that's all they think of is country gospel, bluegrass gospel, and they think that's what I'm talking about. It's not. But anyhow, bluegrass, I don't think it's sinful. I just don't care for it. It's just not my style of music. All right. But that was his. And I didn't have a problem with him coming in and singing some songs. He was a good singer. He was a good musician. And he would come in and sing these songs. Well, he came in, he preached one night for me. And he sang 2 or 3 of these bluegrass gospel songs. And after service, a lady in the church was a fairly new convert. And she came to me and she said, I'm really sorry, but I could not worship while he was singing that song. She said, God saved me out of the bar rooms. And she said, the whole time he was singing, I was having flashbacks of me sitting in those bar rooms, listening to this very same style of music. And she said, I couldn't worship. I could not make my mind forget because of all the things that we did, all the sinful things we participated in when I was sitting in the barroom listening to this same style of music. Now, I'd never sat in barrooms. I didn't have that reference.
Right.
So I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking, yeah, I don't really care for this style of music, but I can worship God. I can listen to the words and I can do okay with it.
Right.
But for her, it was something altogether different. Now, I could have just said, well, sister, look, it doesn't bother the rest of the church. You just need to get over this.
Right.
But real Christian liberty says, I'm not going to take advantage of what I can get by with when I know that's putting a stumbling block in front of her. The same thing to me is true when it comes to using alcohol in communion.
True.
All right, so I can go and take a little cup of wine, no more than what we use in a communion service. Probably not going to enjoy it.
No.
But it's not going to make me go out here and become an alcoholic.
It doesn't bring up a past
It
that I had to
doesn't
get free from.
trigger a past
Right.
from which I was delivered. But my first pastor, God actually saved him. He called himself a wino.
Oh my.
And I heard him say that I really think one glass, one sip would trigger something in me. So I'm not going to take my liberty and flaunt it in front of someone just because it's not going to bother me. It's not going to drag me down. It's not going to destroy me.
Right.
But I don't want to destroy him. I don't want to destroy her. And I have an obligation as a Christian to only partake of those things that will not cause my brother to stumble.
Right.
That's why a lot of these things, as I said, and maybe I'm judging them too harshly, but I believe they're embracing this Christian liberty, quote unquote, because they're abandoning things that they used to preach against. And let's just be honest, it's things like television.
Right.
That they used to have it as a rule. We discourage any of our people from owning one.
Right.
You could not hold license if you owned one. It was absolutely prohibited. It's not anymore. Well, how do you justify that without it looking like we're going backwards?
Why is it those liberties always take you further from the pure things of God? Why is it that they're always in a pursuit of things that we know we shouldn't have? It never takes us the other direction.
I can promise you, for everybody that says, well, I can control my television, here's what I want to know. Not can you control it. I want to know, does the introduction of television into your home make you more spiritual?
No, I can answer for
Does
them.
it lead you to a closer walk with God?
My.
Of course it doesn't.
No.
There's no way they can answer that it does. But I'm just telling you now, I don't know of anybody that owns a television that is deeply spiritual.
Yeah.
I don't know of one.
Well, then they're going to make the comment of, well, you can get this same content online. You can get this on any medium. So
Yes.
why not just,
Yes.
you hold it, you have it, everybody has it. So
Yes.
why not put it in my living room?
Yes. One of the best answers that I ever heard was that there is a difference between television and the internet. And the difference, I think it was Brother Larry Booker who explained it this way. He said, suppose you go to a restaurant. There are two buffet lines. Some of the food in both of these lines, some of the food is poison. In one of the lines, there are servers that are going to put the food on your plate. In the other line, you choose what foods you want on your plate. So with that in mind, you tell me, are they the same thing? The answer is no. If I've got control of the serving spoon, I determine whether I'm putting poison on my plate or not. The difference between television and the internet is television dips out the poison. We know there's poison out there on the internet,
Right.
but we don't have to get it. To me, the internet is like a library. And if we're going to preach against the internet, we have to preach against the library, because there are sections of the library that have got pornographic materials.
Right.
But I don't go in those sections. I can go into the library and find books that I know are good quality. I choose what I take out of that library. But if I want to find the bad stuff, I can find it in the library.
Sure can.
The same thing is true of the internet. There are sections of the internet that I'm just not going to go to. But I don't care what happens with television. They're making the choices for me. My only choice is which one of these bad options do I want?
Right.
Oh, I just watch a ball game. Well, that's another subject in and of itself, because that's something else that used to be preached against.
Number 2 on the list.
But even at that, so what are the commercials
Right.
that are being played? And you can't unsee it
Sure cannot.
once it's there. And the halftime things that go on, and you name it. Here's what we've got to remember. The psalmist said, I will set no wicked thing before my eyes. He didn't say, I will never have something wicked come before my eyes. But he said, I'm not going to make a willful choice to go look at it. Which is what Job said. I've made a covenant with my eyes. I can't help it if I'm out shopping and someone walks in front of me scantily clad and they're exposing their body. I can't help that.
Right.
I can turn away, I don't have to continue to gaze at it, but I can't help the fact that I saw it. But it's something altogether different to go looking for it.
True.
To drive into parts of town where you know that's what they're doing and that's how they're dressing. To willingly go looking for those things is one thing. To simply have it pass before you is another. And yes, there are times that I'm doing something on the internet that some advertisement comes up that I wish I hadn't seen. Right? But I'm not going and looking for that stuff. And I still have full control. And if I see, okay, that's the kind of stuff that's advertised on this website,
Right.
I don't go back to
I
that
don't go.
website.
And it's the same
I'm
thing
done.
happened when we was a kid. We would hear driving down the road, and all of a sudden, beer commercials would come on. My parents reach over and turn it off. That was just like, we're not doing that. We're not going to let our kids sit here and listen to it. And they made those decisions.
Yes. And now, today, the commercials are, if it was just a beer commercial,
Right.
we'd be doing good. But they talk
Right.
about everything imaginable.
Sure do.
This whole idea of television equals internet is just ridiculous. It's a crazy argument. And if somebody really, really believes it, then they need to get rid of the internet too.
Right.
But I don't believe the argument. I don't accept the premise that they're the same thing, because I'm in control of what I'm putting on my plate when I go to the internet. My iPad is connected to the internet as long as it's turned on. But it's not flashing images at me until I do something.
Right. I seen a stat the other day, and it stuck in my mind. I don't know how true it is. You know how stats are. Anybody can make one up. But I thought they said it was like 3/4 of the internet is vile, just pure, sinful, just putrid. But then the rest of it actually has some meaningful content. And you control how much of that you look at and how much of that you pursue after, to your point you just made.
Yes.
Versus someone else made those decisions for you, a programming decision for you. This hour, this show is going to be on, these commercials are going to run, this is prime time, these are our typical audiences, versus I go to my computer and I make
Yes.
decisions.
And look, let's face some facts here. Our apostolic forefathers made a stand against television when there was nothing evil being broadcast over
Right.
it. See, I'm old enough to remember when they showed, if a program showed a married couple, they were never in the same bed. It showed them in twin beds with a nightstand between them and their bodies fully clothed. And that's as risque as it got when I was a kid. But I remember when there were rules governing what could be broadcast. And in fact, folks don't remember this, but it created a huge stir when Gone with the Wind came out. When he said, frankly, my dear, I don't give a. And that's the only word in the entire movie. But it was the first time that Hollywood put a curse word in a movie.
It was Gone with the Wind.
It was Gone with the Wind.
Wow.
Now, we hear that word so commonly today, we don't think anything about it. But when it came out, it was a huge stir. People were so offended that they would cross that line. Look, it's such a different world today, but back in those days, if a man cussed in front of a woman, he would apologize.
Sure.
I'm sorry, ma'am, I'm sorry. There was a respect that he had for women, that he wouldn't talk that way in front of a woman. For Hollywood to just blatantly let this word be said over the screens, it shocked America. But that was just the beginning. And the floodgates opened from that point to where anything's allowed today. And even children's cartoons
Right.
are talking about homosexuality. And we've come a long way from Gone with the Wind, all right? But what I started to say was our forefathers took a stand against television when there was no cursing, there was no obscenity, there was no immorality. I heard Elder E.L. Holly make a statement. He said, when he was a kid, the only kissing that ever went on the big screen is when Roy Rogers kissed his horse.
Let's come a long way
We've
from
come
that.
a long way. And of course, I say now, I remember when married couples didn't sleep in the same bed. Well, we've gone full circle now.
Yep.
They're not sleeping in the same bed now because they're sleeping in somebody else's bed.
That's right.
But it's shown, and the whole activity is shown. But our forefathers took a stand against it as being ungodly when none of that was being shown. And why did they do it? There was no black and white, thou shalt not have a television.
Right.
They did it because in prayer, they felt condemnation from the Spirit. And it's a good thing, because once it's ever brought into a home, it's extremely difficult to get it out of there.
Right.
But by making a stand against it before it became widespread, apostolic homes did not embrace it until years later.
Right.
It's amazing to me, and this is where I said a while ago, we may lose our whole listening audience. But it's amazing to me that these proponents of ignoring what our forefathers taught us will often say, but those guys just weren't as educated as we are. So to them, this is a contest of intellect. My argument is, are you going to tell me we are more spiritual than they were? We may be more intellectual, but don't try to convince me we're more spiritual
Right.
than men who prayed 3 or 4 hours a day, every day. When we talk about the kind of miraculous things that they saw, the things that went on, the kinds of revivals that they had, don't try to convince me that today's movie watching, sports teams following, just how blunt do I get here? Makeup wearing, quote unquote apostolics, are more spiritual. When we have to have a chart that tells us spend 5 minutes praying this way and 5 minutes this way and 5 minutes this way, and by the time you've worked your way around the chart, you've prayed an hour.
Right.
Those old timers didn't have a chart with pray 5 minutes for each thing. You got a little timer going off. They didn't do that. Yeah. But they knew what travail was all about, and they knew what it was to walk in the Spirit. Don't try to convince me that we're more spiritual than they were. And those men preached with a conviction that these things are wrong. And now we say they're okay because we're smarter than they were. Will you tell me, in God's scale, which is more important? Man's intellect or God's Spirit? Which of those two is going to bring us closer to God? I think we all know the answer.
Yes, sir.
But all of these things that they're now finding this liberty to do are things that our forefathers felt convicted against. And, another thing that they throw, well, there were some of them that preached against radio. There were some of them that preached against red shoes. Yes, there were extremes.
Sure.
There will always be extremes, but that was not the majority. But the majority did stand against television. And the majority did stand against movies.
Right.
And the majority did stand against sports. The majority did. A few outliers preached against red shoes and buckles and bows, and there were outliers that made the extreme stance. But the majority held to these things that we now today willingly embrace. I think I'll stand with those men who walked with God and made the decisions they made not based on their intellect, but based on their relationship with God.
Thank you, Bishop Riggin, for providing a biblical view on how loving God and loving people gives us true liberty. Join us next week on Face the Truth as we continue our discussion on Christian maturity, Part 2. Thank you to everyone who has joined us for today's podcast. We want you to know that we are here to help you in any way we can. If there is anything we can do for you, please don't hesitate to contact us. Send your prayer requests to prayer@olathetruth.com. That's prayer@olathetruth.com. If you live in the Kansas City metropolitan area, we invite you to join us for our services this week. Sunday morning at 10, Sunday evening at 6, and Tuesday evening at 7:30. For those who cannot attend, we will provide a live stream on our Facebook page, our YouTube page, and our website, olathetruth.com/live. Until our next podcast, take care and God bless.